You're listening to Pro Community, a Socius podcast, the show where online community meets business performance.
Welcome to episode number 15 of Socius' social business web show, Pro Community. I'm Josh Paul. This is the show where online community meets business performance. You can see all of the episodes of Pro Community at socius.com, where you can subscribe to the show as well as subscribe to it as a audio podcast in iTunes. I'm very pleased to have with me today Michael Silverman, founder and CEO of Drupal development firm Duo Consulting and the co-author of the new book, Capturing Community, How to Build and Manage and Market Your Online Community. Welcome, Michael. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Now, this is an excellent book. I'm going to hold it up again so everybody can see it. And it's an excellent book that covers a range of topics that business people will be very interested in on the topic of building online communities for business and for getting organizational results. Now, let's start out with the big question. Why this book and why now? Somebody who's well-known in the Drupal community and well-known in other business circles, Why online communities? Why write a book about online communities?
Well, it's always been an area that I've been into. Okay, so online communities have been around forever, I feel like for 20 to 25 years with listservs and forums and such. And when I left my first business, my first business was making products for people with disabilities, and we were acquired, and I had a non-compete, and I stayed a couple of years, but when I left, I had to move into a new area, and this was in the late 90s. So 95, we had Netscape. In 97, I started RehabCentral.com, which was a community about the industry I knew, which was rehabilitation equipment, but bringing it onto the internet, which was an area that was relatively new. And what I found is that I was way ahead of my time trying to sell people on participation in a community when they're asking, should they even put their stuff on the internet? So that's what led me toward Duo Consulting, and we've been doing that for the last 13 years. So it's always been there. In 05, we acquired a company in the first downturn, I say, called Nexiv, which focused on online communities. So we brought in some of those people, and they were into communities and building a lot of community functionality. And then over the last few years, we've been involved with more communities. And it hit me that now it's like a new thing because of Facebook and LinkedIn. So many people are on communities that they really understand how you can sort of how it is another channel of communication to communicate with people online. So that's why I think it's a new opportunity now, and that's why I decided to write the book.
That's a good introduction. And so who are you writing the book for? Who's driving communities within organizations?
When I came up with it, and I kind of said a crazy idea to write a book about this, and I worked with a writer, Mark Sherbin, who really helped me vet the ideas and execute on this book to get it done. And it's part of the reason I think it's such a good book to read. But basically, I was focused on entrepreneurs, marketing directors, and association managers. So entrepreneurs, because I see a business opportunity here for people to create online communities that can have real value. And it can be a business for them for 10 years or 20 years, or it could be something that maybe that they would sell. Marketing directors, because I see it as a great opportunity for marketing your products or services online, owning the real estate where the conversation is happening. There's lots of value there, both in intelligence as well as in, say, branding or messaging. And then I think association managers, because associations, in my mind, by definition, they have the communities. I mean, associations are groups of people, focused around a specific topic, and they're generally physical, and they're generally built around an annual conference. And I thought that for many of them, if they don't own the online community for their association, somebody will do it, and they'll either have to buy it or they'll have competition. Not that one replaces the other, of course. I'm not saying that, but I thought associations were logical candidates for this.
That's interesting. So if an association does not create and own and grow and establish the online community for their industry, then your other audience, the entrepreneurs, will create one. And we're seeing that more and more with online community first membership organizations, whether they're for-profit or non-profit. And they don't have the overhead, and that it's a whole different conversation. But
right,
it's a very serious issue for associations.
It's sort of the innovator's dilemma that if you're it's a famous book by that name, but if you're very comfortable with your present business model that say is bringing people in at $2,000 a piece to an annual conference, and of course a lot more than that. I'm not trying to be a flip. It may be hard to think about people that can get membership in a group with a lot of assets, let's say, for a couple $100 a year. So it may be tough to do that. On the other hand, it may be a good strategy for an association to let entrepreneurs build or fight it out, and whoever begins to get traction and is able to really start aggregating what you might consider to be your community, then suck them into your fold. So it may be a good strategy, but they should at least be aware of it. They shouldn't be not doing it because they don't want to. Someone else will.
And that's one of the themes in the book, is there is no one way to use an online community. Different organizations, you cover every corner of how this can be used in both a strategic and tactical level.
Mm-hmm. So I'm really trying in the beginning of the book, the first few chapters, to really focus on the business opportunity and the strategy. So there is a business opportunity is the core message. It varies, of course, depending on what your business is, but it's an opportunity that should be considered by anyone focused on marketing or growing their organization. And then there's different ways to approach that business opportunity. But like any business, you want to make sure that you're standing for something. So you have to make sure it's narrow enough that it's something that people can really be passionate about, but broad enough that you can bring in enough people to your particular community to get the kind of participation that you need to really get it going. And then the rest of it is really best practices.
You're right. Best practices
within communities.
Absolutely. And so let's talk a second for that business opportunity. You researched and interviewed, you and Mark, in writing this book, a lot of different organizations, different types of organizations. Were there some common themes in terms of the business opportunity that organizations are capitalizing on with online communities?
Not common themes as far as type. So I can run through different types we came across and different goals. So that wasn't common. But what was common was if they were going to be successful in really building the community, it needed to be narrow and focused. So that somebody behind it with passion was driving it. It seems like you really needed to get that if you just build a community and put it out there and expect people to come, that's not going to happen. So that's a whole nother part of it, which is the community management part, which is not really what the book is focused on. The book's focused on the opportunity and best practices or components that you might want to build in a community, but the management of the community is a very important part as well that is critical to success.
All right, that's a huge topic, in and of itself. So let's talk for a second about the different types of online communities that you'll see in business.
Okay, so I came up with 5, 6 different types here. Okay, and I'll give you an overview, and then we could dig into a couple of them if you like. So there's location type communities. They're really based on where people are. So a big example of this is Yelp. I mean, a lot of us are using Yelp, and it's restaurants, bars, evening activities in a particular location or area or region. So we're drawn together to that community by location. Now, I meant to check. I don't know if Yelp went public yet. They were supposed to go public this year with a valuation of close to $1 billion. So that talks about the value that can be created. And Yelp is, I think, about 5 or 6 years old tops, okay? Another location-based community that's probably not going public for $1 billion right now, out there to help people that want to share, are willing to share. So it's partially on the environmental side and partly saving money and just being a good neighbor. So if you've got a wheelbarrow or a lawnmower or an extra long ladder, there's things that you might have in your garage that you use 2-3 times a year, 4 times a year, and you'll share them with your neighbors, camping equipment and such. You don't want to just put it on Craigslist and say, hey, anybody want this stuff for a weekend? Come by, So what they do is they aggregate what you define as your community by, you put in your physical address, they send a key essentially to your physical address. With that key, you're validating you are at that physical address, and your neighborhood is however, in a sense, you define it, whether it's 4 blocks or a mile or whatever. And those are people that now you have the ability to say share, or even, I think, slightly rent, things like that you might have, that you share with a neighbor. So that's a
What's the name of that community?
That's neighborgoods.net.
Neighbor
I think it's
Goods.
a great idea.
It is.
There's a couple other, I think, coming up with similar models. I think, again, that works well for associations because in my previous work, we work with United Cerebral Palsy, and a lot of these organizations want to share equipment among their constituents, like wheelchairs and walkers and physical equipment. So it could work for something like that. Activity-based communities, are people that are doing a certain activity. So here in Chicago, we built a community for a group called Built in Chicago. And Built in Chicago is for, digital entrepreneurs. So it's focused in on entrepreneurs, people creating new businesses in the digital space. So it narrows it that way as well. And this community was started by Matt Moog, and he did it on kneeing originally, and it really took off. They got to maybe 5,000 members within the first 6 months. So, it started to get some legs. He brought some more resources in, and we got involved when he wanted to migrate it off of kneeing and onto, his own platform so they could do what they wanted to and have total control. So that's an activity-based community. Demographic-based communities, okay? I have a strong, for instance, in the gay community, community sites for, specific individuals, but also it could be like the Alzheimer's Association has a community for people that are dealing with people with Alzheimer's, and that's an example of an organization that built the community, and it's a big community and a broad community, and it's a demographic-based community. There's goal-oriented communities. The most popular or famous right now, I think, is Kickstarter, where, you can put up a project to do like a watch with digital ink looking for $100,000 or something. And these guys, I think, raised $10 million for their digital ink watch that, wirelessly synchronizes to your smartphone. But that's a community. It's a community of people looking to raise money for a particular project. And if you want to bring that into the nonprofit space or the more altruistic space, let's say, change.org is a community of people that are looking to accomplish certain goals. So, for instance, that's the Bank of America, I believe, was going to charge $5 for their, debit cards, and the community basically came up behind that. And I think this started with a petition on Change and said, hey, this sucks. You can't charge us $5 with every transaction or whatever for those cards. And within a week, I think they changed their plans to do that. And then lastly are the brand communities. So brand communities, I have one in my slides that I show that's for Tide. There's, believe it or not, a lot of people out there that are passionate about Tide detergent, or what gets out what stain, or how you get out tough stains, I guess. I always kind of use it as a little funny one, but I'm sure it's a broader community than many out there. But I also like to use American Express Open as a brand-sponsored community that's really focused on a market that I, small business, bringing them a lot of good information and aggregating people. So they got such, they just started in I think, 07 or 08, and they had, they got 100,000 people or something, and then that allowed them to attract some big speakers like Guy Kawasaki and Pete Cashmere. And then that brought in more people. And then when they integrated with LinkedIn, it brought in more people, and they're in the millions now. And what's interesting is that they're not too heavy-handed there. I mean, you certainly can tell it's American Express, and they have a pod with ads, that run, let's say, on the community, but that's about it. But what I did see was that they get more leads for new cards from business holders, from businesses, business cards, than any other marketing venue on the site. So that's a brand sponsored community. And if the purpose was to, sell more credit cards in a sense, it's their number one channel right now. So, brand sponsored, goal oriented, demographic, activity, location, really broad. And you got to think about that when you're thinking about the opportunities.
Those are great examples of nonprofit and a lot of B2C communities. And you mentioned, the way that American Express approaches their community and whether, it's a business community. They're doing it to drive their business, but they, are letting the community be a community. What are some of the other components of a successful community in terms of scope, focus, or approach that you found?
Let's see. I think that there's opportunities for publishers. So, the publishing space is changing, of course, rapidly. We're reading about it every day. And so especially B2B publishers are going to have a lot of content around a specific narrow focus. And oftentimes they can create a community around that content. So I think there's opportunities there if you've got a lot of content to bring people in via your content, like it attracts people, but then it's the best practices of running the community that will get people to come back or to stay. You have to appeal to your audience emotionally. So there can be business reasons, but people really need to be passionate about what it is you stand for. So I think it's this way with business in general. Always trying to focus people to be more narrow, but I think you have to appeal sort of emotionally. You got to get activity in the community early. So oftentimes that's by seeding it with people that you know, or paying people to participate, or giving them other bonuses to participate above and beyond, say, gamification. And then you really have to, watch the metrics. It's just like anything on the web, it can be very metric driven, and you can look at that. So those are some of the areas as far as getting the community off and going.
So let's talk for a second about timing. Mm-hmm. Why is this a good time to build community as a business? What is it about the business landscape that makes this a great time to invest in community versus 10 years ago?
I haven't done a lot of research, but on that, but I believe it's because of Facebook and LinkedIn. I mean, I don't know how many people Facebook has now. It's, a billion or more now. And LinkedIn is, I think, very powerful in the professional community, where a lot of the people, for instance, that we would want to reach are. So I think people are having, in general, the majority of the population is having positive experience using online communities, primarily LinkedIn and Facebook, over the last 5 years. Okay? I mean, these tools barely existed, say, more than 5 years ago. So because of that, they're seeing how they can kind of interact with people. And I think if a community is presented to them of an area of their focus, then they can understand what they would do there and be like, why would I ever be interested in something like this? Now, it's also the number one question I get, which is, shouldn't you just build these communities on Facebook or LinkedIn? But we can get to that later if you like.
Well, let's get into it right now. Why would you build your own community, whether it's private or public or a hybrid, versus using some of the tools built into Facebook or LinkedIn?
Mm-hmm. And this is an area where there is a lot of discussion. And I guess my point here is that they are out there, and that is where the people are. So that is true. So you want to sort of connect up to those communities. And in some ways, I say you want to grab the people that are in those communities and pull them over to your community. The biggest reason to do that, if there's the opportunity, is because if you own the real estate where the conversation is happening, I believe you're creating value. If you're doing it on LinkedIn or Facebook, you're still creating value, but you don't really own that value. LinkedIn or Facebook can change the rules anytime, and you're on their platform. You've got their people. You don't know necessarily that much about them other than they've liked you. So that's number one, is that I think there's a business reason why it's advantageous for you to own the space. Now, the other thing is that, with Facebook, for instance, likes are not the same as building a community. Just because I like a brand or a product, or a person doesn't mean that I'm passionate about that community, okay? I can like someone's music, but I'm not passionate about hip hop, okay? So it's different. Liking does not mean that you're passionate about the community. So the people that like something don't have common interests. So it's hard to build something around those people. Generally, when you do that and you subscribe to, say, a group in LinkedIn, stuff is just getting pushed out to you. There's not a lot of participation two-way. Certainly people put out those questions, who would you recommend for community software? And then all the different vendors come in and answer with their product. And sometimes, of course, you are getting good input, but it's not led by the community members. It's really led by someone that's running that page or that group. So therefore, it's more one-sided. And it's really, the numbers are all that matters. Like, what I'm sure people are reporting on how many likes they have. And next month, they want to have more likes. Okay? Likes don't matter. What matters is really measures of engagement. So again, the metrics are different between the two. And, we're not generally using gimmicks to drive the action. There's companies out there that can run promotions to get you 1 million likes. I mean, if that's what you want. So I don't think those things are bad. I think what's interesting is that I've seen people create communities in LinkedIn, for instance, and then create their own community and then try to migrate people by sending them messages to please register over here. This is where there's an archive of everything. There's this, etc. And lastly, of course, the brand. You can't really control the brand on LinkedIn or Facebook. I mean, you can have a splash page or you can throw your logo up there, but you can't really control the brand to the extent you can with a wall community.
And I think Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter and Google Plus all play a very important role, but it's not the community building role that a lot of times it's the hub and spoke model where you're drawing people in, you're building reach to bring people back to your product, which is the community. I have a couple articles out there on why businesses and membership organizations avoid building their customer communities or their member communities in Facebook or LinkedIn. Mm-hmm. And they, like you said, they're some of the most popular articles we've written.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And one of the other
just for that reason.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say, and so therefore that comes back to the original question, is because people are so into these other communities, I think they're really open to what you can accomplish with a walled community.
Right. I think one of the other points to add to the list that you brought up for reasons to own your community, put up a private community, is differentiation. If you're putting up a LinkedIn group, it's just as easy for your competition to do the same. If you have a robust Facebook page, it's just you're one of many different places, people in your industry who has practically the exact same tools available to you.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So how do let's go in this direction. People come up to you and ask, is this social hype or are there real business level benefits to be achieved? What do you say to them?
I guess I bring up examples like Yelp is going to go public for $1 billion. I mean, I know that doesn't happen that often, but no, there's real business benefits. I mean, there's just any of the successful communities out there that you research, it doesn't take that long to come across the real business benefits that they have. So for instance, American Express saying they get more new business card applications from their community than anywhere else. That's pretty amazing because those guys spend some money on marketing, right?
Right.
So no, I think that if you can do it, if you can aggregate a community around a particular topic, there's clear business value. It's not, though, easy to do. I don't think people should underestimate the what's required to make that happen. So, but it doesn't mean that it can't be done. And in a way, I see it as the Wild West. I mean, people are doing it for all the different niches that are out there. And I would guess that maybe 10 or 15% of the available niches are already under attack. Okay, people are staking their claims, which means that 70 or 80% aren't, let's say. So I think there's a lot of opportunities there, and that's going to be, settled out, I think, over the next, say, 5-10 years.
Yeah, and it's really the ultimate owned media, to own your social network in that space, where you can segment people the way you want, you can publish the content, you can really drive engagement and control the analytics on the back end to improve engagement even more.
And even if it's not a business that you're going to sell for, $1 million or $1 billion, for many entrepreneurs, it could be a great business opportunity, because in many ways it will position them as an expert for that niche and for that market. And they might be able to bring in, great consulting gigs or speaking opportunities or, strategic consulting opportunities to assist people in that market. And they'll really have a fingerprint on that market through the analytics and metrics and the ability to ask questions of that group on behalf of people that are interested. So it's a very interesting way for, say, an entrepreneur that understands digital media and is passionate about a particular area, vertical, market, niche, to build a business.
So you mentioned just the amount of, not underestimating what it takes to build a successful community. Mm-hmm. Briefly, what is some advice you'd have for business people in terms of what they should expect when building and launching and planning a community?
Mm-hmm. The first thing I mentioned before is that you've got to have a narrow enough focus that people can be passionate about what your community is about. I think some people want to go broader, like we'll do a community in real estate or we'll do a community in food service. Those are too broad. Generally they're too broad unless you're, say, American Express, okay? So you want to be narrow. Then as far as creating the community, there's different ways to do it. There's different software available. You guys have a platform. There's different tools out there. There are definitely tools that you can use software as a service and get going less expensively, like Ning was one of those tools. I'm not sure it's really out there anymore. I know they were acquired, by the way, for I think $2 million. But mainly I think for their email addresses so that they could be mined from a marketing point of view. But you can start with a platform like that, and then if you get traction, then you've got to migrate, for instance, into maybe a more robust platform. So it's kind of good for testing the concept and getting your market straight, but the migration isn't always easy. Many times these software as a service platforms, for instance, they let you export the data, but they may limit the amount of data that you can export at any one time. So I think for Built in Chicago, it took us like 2 weeks to export the data because we can only do, a gigabyte per night or something. Or you can invest more up front on a custom platform and do whatever you want. But then, of course, if you're making changes and such, it may be a more expensive way to do it. So I think the most important thing really is to understand what market you're targeting, who's passionate about it, and how you're going to get those first, say, 100 or 500 members. And the platform's really secondary because there's so many different platforms that can probably do what you want, that decision should come after you finalize the specific requirements that you're looking for.
In terms of, you talk in the book about the 90-10-1 model, where 90% of your members of your community will just be
lurking.
Right. 10% will
comment,
and 1% will
start new discussions. Is what I say.
Kind of create content. Is that model outdated? We did a study of our customers last year because that model seems not worth it in a lot of cases. Where we were 70, 20, 10 across our customers. But is that still a fair model in terms of setting expectations?
I think it is. I mean, frankly, I don't know that there's that much difference in 70, 20, 10, and what I'm saying, which is sort of 98-2 or something like that. There is a difference, but I think that it's sort of the 80-20 rule. It seems to be a rule sort of like that in different ways across the internet, I've seen different studies that seem to come with these metrics. And whether it's 90 or 70 that lurk, it seems like maybe half the people that register go away, don't ever comment, whether they're lurking or even very rarely coming back. I mean, we could call that lurking, but not much. And then I think it is easier for people to comment on somebody else's thing, so that means that the job of that community manager is so important because they're doing things like polls or surveys or questions or staying in touch with what's happening in the news where people might comment against these questions. So that's where the community manager can make a big difference. And then I do believe that maybe only 2 out of 100 or so are really going to be those people that create sort of innovative new content. So I think it's good to keep in mind when you think about sizing and scoping your community. So I talked to one group, for instance, and they felt that there were maybe 100 members of their community that they could get. And I said, it's going to be hard to build a vibrant community around a 100-member community. If they're all vibrant, you got it, okay? But if only 2 are, it's not going to happen. So I think it's a good rule to keep in mind, but whether it's that or 70, 20, 10, I'm not going to argue that one with you.
So a couple more questions before we wrap up. What surprised you the most as you were writing this book in terms of the way companies do or don't view owned online communities as a strategic asset?
What has surprised me? I guess it seems that when I'm out and speaking, so when I'm speaking to executives about communities, usually they're interested. They know they want to do it, and they found us because they're interested in building a community on the Drupal platform, or they know I wrote the book and my name's out there. And so they want to build a community. So they're talking to me, okay, and they're into it, and they're the exception. What I find is when I'm doing a little bit more on the public side, where there's like seminars and I'm a speaker and people kind of are forced to listen in, people are not really seeing the opportunity that I'm seeing. So I feel that when I said that maybe 10% of the market is claimed now or 15%, that's where I get that sense that a lot of people haven't even really seen that this is a real opportunity today, not only because of LinkedIn and Facebook, but I think also because you can create communities for so much less cost than you could, say, 5 or 10 years ago. I mean, these things would be $1 million to create and build, and clearly you can get up much less expensively now. So I think just being aware that it's an opportunity, it's surprising to me that so many have yet to see that.
Right. That's a good point, and that means the organizations and the executives that do get it, will have a leg up. And we had, I was doing an interview for our social CRM episode a couple weeks ago, and the gentleman I was interviewing said, it's a 9-inning game, and we're in the early innings of understanding the opportunity of communities. Yeah,
and it's basically that way on the internet. I mean, the internet, maybe we're a little farther along, but we're still in the early innings. So I think communities and the software and getting the interaction going and finding new ways for people to interact online, it's still early. So the opportunities are there.
So 2 more questions. What if I'm an executive who understands the opportunity, or is beginning to understand the opportunity, what are some steps that my organization can take to get started in planning an online community?
What can they do to get started? I would say
Just
researching out different platforms and or people that are out there. The first thing I think you want to do is see if anyone's doing it already. Oftentimes people may have a blog that's really focused on your community, so it's not a community so much as a blog that a lot of people are subscribing to. And then you look at their blog role. So you want to really understand what's going on online in the market niche that you're focusing on first, and then you want to infiltrate it a little bit, like really understand who's there, what they're talking about, and who makes up this market. Because if there isn't really a community and you're really still seeing that opportunity there, then you want to bring all these people in to help them promote and drive people to your community if they're already aggregating them. So I think that's what I would do, is I'd really look at the market that way. And then at the same time, you can explore different options from, hosted communities to building it yourself, as far as the costs involved.
I think that's good advice. And so to wrap it up, you have done a lot of speaking around your new book to promote your new book as a result of capturing community. And a lot of times you're speaking to business leaders. And when you're giving those talks, what is the one takeaway you want them to walk out of the room with?
I guess I want, everyone is so busy nowadays, especially I think marketing people, because, the marketing landscape is changing so quickly as people are trying to move from, traditional to digital, where it's measurable, is to basically try and step back and sort of get a little space and really think about whether this is an opportunity for their organization. Because I don't think they have to be in a hurry. I don't think you need to do this, by March of 2013 or you're out of the running, But if you just don't think about it, because it takes time to build communities, then that opportunity may pass you by, and either your competitor will own it or you're going to pay a lot of money to acquire it. So just really think about whether that's an opportunity that's ripe for their business goals.
Well, Michael, I want to thank you for sharing your insight and experience today. I hope we can do this again sometime.
Okay. Thanks for inviting me.
Before we go, where can people find you on the web?
Well, my company is Duo Consulting, DuoConsulting.com. And please come by and reach out. I'm at M. Silverman at Duo Consulting, or M. Silverman Duo is my Twitter handle, and book's available on Amazon.
Great. The book is Capturing Community, How to Build, Manage, and Market Your Online Community. And as always, you can see the past episodes of Pro Community at Socius.com, and you can also subscribe to the show in an audio podcast format on iTunes, where 5-star ratings and great reviews are appreciated. Michael, I want to thank you once again, and have a great day.
Okay. Thanks, Josh.